Welcome back to Alyssa's Movie Takes. If you are new to the channel, I welcome you here. I do movie and TV reviews and think pieces from a Christian perspective. So I welcome you to subscribe and share any content that you really enjoy. And today I want to look at the new movie, Jesus Revolution, which is directed by John Erwin, who did I Can Only Imagine, I Still Believe, and a few other films. And then Brent McCorkle is his co-director, not his brother this time, but it's Brent McCorkle. And then it's written by John Erwin, and then also John Gunn and Greg Laurie. It's based off Greg Laurie's books. Greg Laurie is a pastor in California who has a really massive church and a pretty big influence online. So what is this movie about? This movie takes place in the 1960s, the late 1960s, and something of a phenomenon happened. As you had the hippies sort of migrating to California and wanting the free sex and the free love and the free drugs and just this kind of revolution that they wanted to start, there was this sort of side thing that started to happen, which is a lot of the hippies started to come to know Christ. And it was what may be called traditionally a revival. This major moment in time where a lot of people were coming to know the Lord. It started to spread across the country. And while statistically Christianity has not grown in America since then, it was a big marker for a lot of the boomers, right? So they would have been teens or early 20s. And if they came to know the Lord, they might have come to know the Lord in this time period. I have people that I know that came to know the Lord in this time period. I also know people who kind of got swept up in the Jesus movement and are no longer walking with Christ. So there's kind of those two sides of it. But that's probably true for many of you too. You either maybe know people who got saved in this movement or know people who came to know the Lord and then sort of fell away over time. But let's take a look at this movie's acting first off. So the three main characters that you have are Chuck Smith, played by Kelsey Grammer, and then you have Lonnie Frisbee, played by Jonathan Roumie, who is Jesus in The Chosen. He's not Jesus in this movie. He plays Lonnie Frisbee, who was sort of the hippie that started the movement. And then you have Joel Courtney as Greg Laurie, who is a young teen, kind of at the end of his rope, who comes to know Jesus and finds his place in ministry through the Jesus movement. Now, they call it the Jesus Revolution as a title, but most commonly when you hear it online or in research, you're going to hear it referred to as the Jesus movement. So the acting from these three is pretty great. Like, they're all just stellar actors. Kelsey Grammer obviously is a longtime TV actor from Frasier. He said that he was just so passionate about this film. It's one of the best things, or his most favorite roles he's ever played, getting to play Chuck Smith, who is this real life character. I think Jonathan Roumie is a great character actor, and he just brings himself fully to this role of this hippie who loves Jesus, right? And that's exactly what you get on screen, is this hippie who loves Jesus. He just lives and breathes sort of the happy-go-lucky hippie guy. And then Joel Courtney as Greg Laurie does a great job. Joel Courtney, you might know if you've seen the Netflix show The Kissing Booth. He was one of the guys in that show, and he does a good job of this sort of this kid coming to know God, and also the kind of the pressures that it puts on him and the life decisions he has to make because of it. So all great acting. Where it suffers a bit is in the story structure, and partly this is because they do have three stories going all at the same time, that they're not able to do them all justice. There seemed to be sort of this back-ended conflict, like all the conflict happens toward the end and not sort of sprinkled out in the middle. And so by the time they get to it, they kind of rush through it, and then they give you the conclusion, and I felt a bit unsettled of, oh, did this just naturally resolve itself? Because we just sort of see how it naturally resolves itself in the post credits. And then if you Google it, with what happens with Lonnie, it doesn't sound like it was good. He dies young, and there's a tragic reason behind it. And so it's hard to kind of reconcile what they're showing you with his life, what they're showing you with what they started with the movement, and then what actually happened in real life. So it feels a little too glossy and a little too sugar-coated for what actually happened in the long run. And part of what happened in the long run is what I mentioned. A lot of people fell away, and maybe it's tied to some of the conflicts that they start to bring up in the end, where Chuck Smith and Lonnie started to go head to head over what should be happening. But they don't give you enough time on screen to be able to really deal with some of the bigger pressures of life that are starting to happen, right? The reality of a lot of the hippies were homeless. What do you do with them then? Lonnie is in a sort of a troubled marriage, and that never really goes anywhere. Greg's arc has probably the strongest arc. And it makes sense, it's his book, based on his book, but there's a lot of time spent in flashback that I don't think was really necessary, because it's it's not so much about his past, but about where he is right now. He's got enough going on in his life right now that we don't need to flash back. So the story structure there, I think, suffered. While I applaud them for at least going into the darker areas, I don't think they should be afraid to keep going and to explore what really happened, because then we can maybe learn even more from this movement, lessons to be gained. And next time I'm going to talk about, was this a model or was this a warning, this movement of what we should and what we shouldn't do in a revival. The cinematography was great, really beautifully shot. I think that is an advantage of having made some successful films. The Erwins have some access to some real Hollywood money now, and they can make their films look beautiful. And was it rewatchable? I would say no. I would say maybe I'll watch it on TV at some point down the road, but I had the chance to watch it again this weekend, and I opted for it to move me because it feels a little bit too much like a made-for-TV biopic. The Irwins have found their lane in biopics, and fortunately, with the Christian audience, you can kind of bring biopics that would normally just end up on streaming to the big screen and still make a lot of money. For example, this movie did fairly well for even though just a normal release. It made 15.5 million in its opening weekend, which put it in third place. The Cocaine Bear beat it, and also Ant-Man beat it, but I think it's funny that the Cocaine Bear horror story beat it. But that is actually an interesting piece of information. The low budget movies that make money are either horror, right, where you have a bear just eating cocaine and attacking people in the woods, or Christian films where you have something that may, like I said, may be made for TV in other circumstances, but you have a built-in audience and they'll show up for it with little marketing. This they did a good job of marketing this film, and it seems to be one of those movies that gets the youth groups to come, or gets the church groups to come after church. Maybe not the youth groups, but the church ladies Bible studies would go see it after church today. So I'm not going to knock that it's successful. I just wish that they had spent a little more time hashing through some of the really hard and human pieces that come when God starts to move, and that brings up all of our humanity to the top of the surface. So that's my take on Jesus Revolution. Let me know what you thought about the movie, if you saw it in theaters, or if you have an opinion that's different than mine, in the comments below. And I look forward to talking with you soon.